We saw it last week, doubtless we'll see it again this week too. A House divided, a cabinet divided, a country divided over Brexit, rendering politics impotent, unable to deliver clarity. Labour is divided too. 90 Labour MPs defied their leadership's instruction to abstain on a motion urging the government to stay in the single market, in effect. I've been looking at the pressures on the party, starting at Labour Live, this weekend's festival in North London.
Ours is a politics of hope. Ours is a politics of determination. Ours is a politics of inclusion.
The enthusiasm is evident, but as Jeremy Corbyn went on stage, a long banner was unfurled in the middle of the crowd. "Stop backing Brexit," it read. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell recognises the problem.
We're walking a tightrope in the Labour Party because we're trying to bring both sides together, because that's the only way we'll achieve the sort of compromise that will protect jobs and the economy overall. Do not mistake democracy for dissent. We're allowing people to say that this is what I believe. We'll take on board, respect their views, and we'll bring them together. We brought them together this week. We brought them together supporting a customs union, supporting that relationship with the internal market that we set out in our amendment. Some wanted to go further. I can understand that. The majority didn't.
This festival in the park is pretty full, despite the pundits' scornful predictions. But on the way in, a lady handing out stickers. Rude stickers. So what are you saying to them?
I'm saying what it says on that sticker.
Well, you're probably right not to read it out. It's something to Brexit, but it's not very polite.
Well, but it's not a swear word either.
Inside, loads and loads of people wearing those yellow stickers saying to Brexit. See the badge you're wearing. What do you think of Brexit?
The badge says it all. I'm very, very disappointed the way this government is taking us, and I'm a Remainer, and I'm very disappointed in Labour not having a clear policy on it. I'm a lifelong Labour supporter.
And Corbyn did say that he was listening to the membership. I don't think he's ever asked me what I want in terms of Brexit. So I do think there's something also about Labour not coming to the membership and asking us what it is we want and where we want this party going in terms of Brexit.
No one now doubts Jeremy Corbyn's appeal to this crowd, but on this issue he's got history, lots of history. His position on Brexit has very deep roots. Listen to this from the Labour conference in 1996.
We have a European bureaucracy totally unaccountable to anybody. Powers have gone from national parliaments, they haven't gone to the European Parliament, they've gone to the Commission and to some extent to the Council of Ministers.
In the 70s and 80s, Europe was one of the critical issues which divided Labour left and Labour right. Jeremy Corbyn's mentor and hero, Tony Benn, led the charge. He fought to leave the common market in the 75 referendum and spoke the year before about his distaste as a minister for that institution.
I felt as if I was going almost as a slave to Rome. The whole relationship was wrong. Here was I, an elected man, doing a job and could be removed, and here were these people with more power than I had. No accountability to anybody.
Jeremy Corbyn echoed this hostility all through his life as a rebellious backbencher. When he stood as leader, he scarcely moderated this position. This is from the 2015 leadership hustings, a very detailed answer to a very pertinent question.
In what circumstances would you advocate a no vote in the European referendum?
Jeremy? I would advocate a no vote if we're going to get an imposition of free market policies across Europe.
The next year, that very forthright, very clear view softened to an underwhelming endorsement of a Remain vote.
Labour is convinced that a vote to remain in is in the best interests of the people of this country.
Helen Lewis is deputy editor of The New Statesman.
His problem with Europe springs from this idea that it's a kind of neoliberal club. It's taking power away from the people. It's rules that are set in somewhere that we really don't have a lot of scrutiny over. And also about some of the things that Labour's economic policy, the idea of renationalisation, state aid, those kind of things, there is a worry that the structures of the European Union are very hostile to them. So he has, Lexiteer is probably maybe slightly too strong a description for it, but that's definitely the wing of the party from which he comes. I think it's very noticeable that you haven't seen a lot of Jeremy Corbyn during this last couple of weeks, right? He's definitely not spending his political capital on this. He's been, he asked questions about it in PMQs. The line very much from Labour is about attacking the sort of exact form that Brexit takes, trying to capitalise on the government's chaos. But there is no suggestion at all that Labour is going to go the way that some of its more ardently pro-European members would like to go in terms of let's have a second referendum.
But what exactly is their policy?
It's attempting to face both ways to some extent. We know Labour members, 2/3 of them voted Remain, and actually they're very keen now. I think about 8 or 9 and 10 of them want to stay in the customs union and single market. So Labour has set out 6 tests that must be passed for it to vote in the end to sign off on the deal. Now, one of those is almost impossible to pass, which is the idea that whatever the deal is, it must deliver the exact same benefits as membership of the single market and customs union. So that makes it quite hard to see how they will actually sign up to whatever comes out of the other end of this pipeline.
At Labour Live, the Unite Union's ice cream van plays a familiar tune. Their leader, the very powerful figure in the Labour movement, Len McCluskey, hands out the goodies.
When Jeremy Corbyn gets into number 10, it's free ice creams for everybody.
Promises, but it's not just socialist ideology which drives Labour's Brexit position. It's also their voters, that sizable minority of Labour voters in what are called traditional seats, who also voted to leave. And perhaps more important, people in leave areas who have to change to Labour to put Mr Corbyn in number 10. But Len McCluskey says there's something for everyone in Labour's policy.
So access to a tariff-free market, a customs union protecting jobs and investments speaks for the 48%. The 52% who basically voted to leave for 2 reasons. One, they feel left behind by Europe. Labour has an industrial strategy that speaks to them.
It's not just the voters and the Labour Party which is divided. Even Corbyn fans, especially young ones, don't share his historic aversion to the European Union. There are lots of people here wearing Corbyn t-shirts, clear where they stand, you'd think. So what do they make of his position on Brexit?
Brexit is always going to be an issue because the entire country is divided between right and left wing. But even the left and the right are divided within themselves regarding Brexit. Whatever Jeremy Corbyn does, he's going to be crucified in the media. That is a given. But the simple fact is he is respecting the mandate of the people. I'm a Remainer. I don't want us to leave the EU. However, the result of the referendum is the result of the referendum. And if he didn't respect that, then it would be the end of him politically.
We're in matching ones.
Matching with your daughter?
Mother and daughter, yeah.
Nice t-shirts.
Thank you.
How do you think he's doing on Brexit?
I think he's doing the right thing in regards to respecting the vote of the public. I don't think any political party is particularly doing that well on Brexit. I don't agree with a second vote for the public.
You don't?
No, I don't, because it will only come back with a similar result. We are divided. We're not going to suddenly get one side getting 80% of the vote.
And yes, it is worth remembering this is London, a strongly Remain area. On the main stage, newly elected member of the party's ruling National Executive Committee, Eddie Izzard, is up next.
Nigel Farage, he pushed very hard to break up the European Union, and then he resigned. What plan is that? That's just...
So what does Eddie make of his leader's position?
I think it's a curious thing on Brexit, this whole thing, and, well, Brex hate, Trump hate, the negativity that comes out around the world. It's always been there. It's back there. We seem to be visiting politics from the 30s. So I think whatever is happening right at the moment is just a point in the battle. And we have to be heading forward. This century, we have to make it the first century when all 7 billion people in the world have a fair chance.
But does that mean stopping Brexit?
It means, well, look.
You would like to?
No, this is why the third referendum is inevitable. Yeah. The first one was 66-34 in 1975. 40 years, the whining right. They whine on and on and on and on and on, saying that's not a good enough mandate. Margaret Thatcher voted for it, and Churchill would have been with us. Churchill said, come on, United Countries of Europe.
Even without a long-term Eurosceptic leader, Labour would have a difficult balancing act. But how much difference does Mr Corbyn make? Daily Mail political correspondent Peter Oborne, well away from the festival, thinks a lot.
He seems to me to be playing the decisive role in Brexit, because the Conservative Party is divided, and the Prime Minister I know it's deliberate dithering, but it's dithering. And I don't think the Conservative government on its own could get Brexit through Parliament. And if Corbyn was determined to stop it, he would stop it. But he's not doing that. He is enabling Brexit, which means that Labour's role in Brexit is now becoming decisive. He could have defeated the government last week, probably, in the Commons, and he deliberately chose not to, defied a massive revolt in his own party, and so he is emerging as the hero of Brexit.
Peter Oborne. Lord Glassman is a Labour peer and founder of Blue Labour. He's with me in the studio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When we first spoke, you suggested that Labour's policy might be summed up by this old song.
First you say you do, and then you don't. Then you say you will, and then you won't. You're undecided now, so what are you gonna do?
The song's called Undecided. Do you think Labour's policy is undecided?
Well, I think Peter Oborne's right. I think Corbyn actually is the decisive factor in the Brexit politics at the moment, in terms of he softens and John McDonnell too. But then when the time comes, ultimately, there's a 3-line whip in the Commons to push it through. And that's really a very sensible position, because while the membership of the Labour Party are overwhelmingly Remain, there's a huge Labour vote in the country that is resolutely Brexit.
But so you agree that Jeremy Corbyn is the saviour of Brexit?
Yeah, I think that's the historic meaning of Jeremy Corbyn, in as much as he comes. You mentioned it was very interesting to hear Tony Benn on your package, slaves to Rome. I mean, that's the view of the left of the Labour Party historically towards the European Union. If you look at Attlee, if you look at Ben, if you look at Barbara Castle, even if you look at Hugh Gaitskell, this idea that democracy in Britain was going to be subordinated to a sort of administrative rule from Europe has long been a fundamental feature of left politics. So Corbyn is faithful to that, and that's been his politics for a lifetime.
And you're also very enthusiastic about Brexit, but you don't share his left-wing politics.
Well, I share the left-wing politics on the fact that there needs to be resistance to capitalism, there needs to be a much more democratic economy. All the stuff with the regional banks, with the nationalisation of the railways and the other utilities, none of this would be legal within the Lisbon Treaty, and particularly with the rulings of the ECJ. So on this, there's a very natural coalition.
We heard Eddie Izzard there talking about, and he was talking from the stage as well, about Brex hate, as he put it. Does it play into a nasty instinct?
I mean, it goes both ways. The first thing, obviously, to say is that there's a very nasty aspect to Remain, a very sneery, snobbish, dismissive attitude in Remain that doesn't seem to be shifting. And the crucial space that Brexit opens up is for a democratic alternative to the consensus of the last 40 years, 50 years, which has only overwhelmingly benefited the already wealthy. And so the challenge for Labour is to articulate a very positive vision of what the country can be like after Brexit. But first of all, we've got to leave. I think once next year, March the 29th, 2019, once we're actually out, I think that space will open up. So in that sense, the Sarah Vaughan undecided position is, as John McDonnell put it just now, the right way to try to keep the party together and then accept the space that opens up.
As we also heard, 2/3 of Labour supporters were Remain. A lot of voices we heard then want a softer position from Labour, are disappointed to varying degrees. Aren't you just going to, if you were right, go annoy them?
Yeah, well, they're going to be annoyed. The question is, are they going to defect from the party? Are they going to split? And I think that once we're out, the dynamics of all that will change. I think there will be a fundamental Remain group that wants a second referendum back into the EU. But I don't think that would be the mainstream of the party position. I think the political possibilities and economic possibilities that open up then become much more real and palpable. And Labour will have to get a positive vision of the national renewal for the next election, which then becomes possible when we leave the EU.
And just quickly, what's going to happen in the Lords this week?
Oh, I think the Kingdom of Romania will remain resolute.
You think?
Yeah, I think so.
But what does that mean for the Commons?
that means there will have to be more voting in the Commons. I mean, the mood in the Lords is completely represents the consensus of the last 30 to 40 years, and that makes sense. But I think that the Democratic representatives in the Commons have an electorate to answer to, and their answer will be different.
Lord Glassman, thanks very much.